This video is brought to you by RaidCon Shadow VPN. A VPN masks your IP address so them online wizards can't steal your information. But RaidCon Shadow VPN works a little bit differently. It uses scantily clad warriors from a terrible mobile game who go to those wizards with terrible earphones that blast bass. The wizards can't even hear the mids or the trebles. It's so bad that they can't steal your IP address and informations. RaidCon Shadow VPN. Go into the link in the description, download yours today, and thank you RaidCon for sponsoring this video. Tell me if you haven't heard this before in video game reviews of any kind. The game is good, but it's not a good blank game. This is one of those statements that sometimes is true, sometimes is false. To me, a good example of this is Tales of Arise. I remember when Tales of Arise came out, there were a lot of people who said things like this. Tales of Arise is a good game, but it's not a good Tales of game. And to me, this was just completely wrong. I went back and I played Tales of Vesperia, and I could totally tell these two games were from the same series, focused on comboing your arts leading into a powerful mystic art. It felt like a Tales of game. I think it's just a new battle system and people getting used to it. On the other hand though, Banjo-Kazooie Nuts and Bolts. This game is nothing like the other Banjo-Kazooie games, or at least it feels way more like a spin-off game. This is an instance where yes, you could maybe say, if you liked Nuts and Bolts, that it's a good game, but it's not a good Banjo-Kazooie mainline game. This conversation is interesting, but I think it has a different side to it that people don't talk about as much. See, storylines follow a similar kind of thing. A storyline that might be good in one game will not be good in another game. So I want to talk about it with Fire Emblem. So, hello, ladies and lords. Hello world, my name is Mink Daddy. What makes a good Fire Emblem storyline? One misconception that I have personally seen online is this idea that the storyline just needs to be good. As long as it's good, then everything's okay with the game. No. The storyline needs to fit the gameplay, and it also needs to fit the series. Doesn't mean every single storyline needs to be the same, but they need to have the same vibe. Otherwise, it just doesn't feel like the game of said series. For example, let's say there's a Metal Gear Solid game. They're coming out with a new one, right? Metal Gear Solid Kindergarten Adventures. Snake has to go undercover, become a kindergarten teacher, and teach little kids math. Why? All to stop a criminal mastermind. The game is full of learning games. Metal Gear Solid people, are you excited for the new mainline game? Probably no. Because here's the thing. That's not a Metal Gear game. Where's the guns? Where's the Metal Gear? Where's the stealth? And it doesn't matter, it might be the best storyline ever made. It doesn't feel like a Metal Gear Solid game. Here's another example I thought of. Let's say you're playing Silent Hill or Resident Evil. However, after all the dark and grueling and evil things, the zombies, it starts to play the cutscene. And it's an episode from Bluey. It's just straight up an episode from Bluey. They're not even trying to be creepy. It's just, that's the storyline. So the gameplay is you're fighting zombies, but the storyline is a Bluey episode. And it doesn't matter that Bluey is really good. That's not anything close to Resident Evil or Silent Hill. It doesn't work. I think a lot of players want better storylines, but don't understand that they're asking for things that just doesn't fit in Fire Emblem very well. See, if you are a Fire Emblem fan, there is a very good chance that you've at least engaged a little bit in storyline discussions. What are the good storylines in Fire Emblem? What are the bad storylines in Fire Emblem? Or maybe even talking about controversial characters. So I want to give you guys my ideas of what makes a good Fire Emblem storyline. This is the basic premise. Fire Emblem, guys, are you paying attention? Is a game about war. Not a game about a shonen protagonist. Therefore, the focus of the storyline should be around the conflict. This is where Fire Emblem is at its strongest. So all the things I'm talking about today are things that draw away too much attention from the main conflict of the Fire Emblem storyline. You can most certainly take breaks, meaning that you maybe have a moment where you get away from the conflict for a second. That's fine, but the conflict should be central. Fair warning, I do get pretty passionate in this video, but I promise you, I am someone who loves civilized discussion, so feel free to comment if you disagree with me. As someone who firmly believes when you critique somebody or something they say, you should always include constructive feedback. That's what I'm hoping to do to the best of my ability in this video. So, here are the 5 things that I think a Fire Emblem storyline needs to be good. Number 1, an emphasis on good world building. Number 2, a little more medieval, a little less fantasy. Number 3, it needs to show the dark side of humanity. Number 4, the characters need to be good. And number 5, no more avatars, self-inserts, and dating sims in Fire Emblem. It should come as no surprise that we will be talking a lot about Fates, because Fates is a textbook example of how not to do a Fire Emblem storyline. And you'll see that it breaks every single one of these rules. There are multiple ways to tell a story, but I want to focus on 3 different stories specifically. First, think about Harry Potter and Star Wars. Now I'm going to level with you. I love Harry Potter and Star Wars, but I don't think their storylines are their strong points. The mainline story of Harry Potter and Star Wars, I feel, both have a lot of holes, and I have a lot of issues with them, even if I overall like them. But one thing is undeniable. They have incredible world building. Don't believe me? Go play Hogwarts Legacy, a game with no Harry Potter, just Harry Potter lore, and it's so good. The Wizarding World is an extremely great world to explore. On the other hand, Star Wars. Go play Knights of the Old Republic and its sequel. These games are phenomenal. You don't need Anakin and Luke Skywalker to have a good Star Wars storyline. With both of these 2 franchises, it's so easy to insert a new storyline and have it be good, as long as you stick to that lore. Don't get me started there. But you get the general idea of what I'm trying to say. The lore is well explained, deep, and has so many cool opportunities. On the other hand, we have One Punch Man. Now hold up. I am not saying One Punch Man is bad. It's just different. I mean, do we know why the monsters attack? Not really. Do we know how all these heroes got their powers? Some, but not really. Why? Because it's all about the humor. It's a comedy. It's supposed to be a funny storyline. Frankly, the deep lore just doesn't really matter. That's not where the focus is with One Punch Man. This is not to say that I think One Punch Man has bad world building, just that it's not epic or grandiose. A lot of things just don't matter, and that's okay. Laugh, we're having a good time. It's totally okay to be this way. It just means that it's very difficult to make a storyline that takes place in the One Punch Man universe without Saitama. It's going to take away from the spirit of the storyline. I don't think this works with Fire Emblem. Why? Because you're dealing with a massive conflict. You're dealing with war. No, we're not talking about that kind of war right now. We're talking about the real kind of war. Calm down. To tell a good war story, you've got to have lore. You can't leave that out. We need to know why these 2 countries are fighting, why do these mercenaries work this way, who started this, who didn't start that, where's the misunderstandings. We need to know how all these pieces come together to create this conflict. Granted, not every question has to be answered, but you got to answer something. Here we go. Fates. With Fates, what do we know about the world? There's 2 countries that fight each other. Why? Because they always have? And then we go to, okay, well, wait, hold up. What about a non-coast? What about the true villain of the story? Let's go to his world. It's gotta be cool, right? No, it's a mysterious, it's interesting, but there's more questions than answers, like, who are the people? Where are the people? Why do we meet this one guy? It's like they try to make an epic world, but they answer no questions. Not everything has to be answered, but you have to give me something. Fates does not have good world building. Why? Because the whole storyline is revolving around Korin. That's it. That's all that matters. Nothing else really matters. And this is why we have a wishy-washy war story that's just not interesting. Please give me Fire Emblem games with good lore that explain enough and give me a reason to be involved in this conflict. The ATLUS games are an excellent example of how to do good, deep lore in Fire Emblem. I feel like I understand this world very well, and all the intricacies between countries and the races. I cannot say the same thing for Fates. With the ATLUS games, I could write my own story easily, or the developers could write another story that takes place in the same world, and it could work totally fine. There's enough information there that you could do that. Fates, I don't think there is. Now, let me clarify something here. I would love to have both. Of course I want to have good world building and a great storyline. That's what I think we get with Lord of the Rings. But this is a video game, so I understand we don't have all the time in the world to do everything. If push comes to shove, please focus a little bit more on the world building than making the storyline flawless. That's number one. When it comes to talking about medieval themes, Fire Emblem is at its best when it's more medieval. Now, what do I mean by that? So imagine a graph. We have medieval to fantasy, and then we have adventure to large-scale conflict. From the spectrum from medieval to fantasy, what am I referring to? Largely, how much of a role does magic play in the storyline? For example, a lot of the Tales games, magic is a big important part. Look at Tales of Arise, Tales of Graces, and Tales of Vesperia, where magic is crucial to how the world works. Without magic, the whole thing falls apart. The point is, magic is such a huge part of that storyline. On the opposite side, think of maybe something more like Kingdom Come Deliverance, or the original Stronghold RTS games. Games with raw medieval storylines where there is no magic. Fire Emblem, I think, is at its best when it leans more towards the medieval side. On the other part of the graph, however, large-scale conflict versus adventure. Fire Emblem, simple. It should be a large-scale conflict. The storyline should not be written like a grand adventure or quest for a small party. It can be focused on a handful of characters, yes, but it's not an adventure story. It's a conflict story. So, putting those two things together, we see Fire Emblem storylines should be in this part of the graph. And again, I feel the need to clarify this. There's nothing wrong with fantasy storylines. Yes, I do want Fire Emblem to have fantasy. I don't want it to go full medieval. But we're not looking at an adventure with friends in a magical world. We're looking at a serious conflict with thousands to millions of people dying. That's what we're really focusing on. It is important to remember the foundations of Fire Emblem. What does the commercial say? Epic warfare simulation. Kaga was trying to make a mostly serious, epic battle game with some fantasy elements. Fire Emblem is best when we stick to that foundation. Fantasy elements are absolutely a part of Fire Emblem, but not the main driving force. Let's look at the Blood Pact in Radiant Dawn, and then you got the Curse in Fate's Revelation. These points commonly drive a lot of Fire Emblem fans crazy. Instead of developing the conflict and coming up with a good reason why Micaiah has to fight Ike and why Korin can't just tell people about what's really going on, they just add in a plot device to magically solve the problem. But it just doesn't work in a war story. These plot devices just make the conflict frustrating. Meanwhile, if we look at a game like Sacred Stones, is magic important in that storyline? Well, absolutely. You got this guy meddling in dark magic, making deals with the devil, essentially. That's a big driving point, right? Yes, but it's largely at the end. Throughout the entirety of the game, the real question is, why did the Grotto Empire, which was so friendly, suddenly attack us? Political drama. I know people don't like political drama, but I'm not talking about today's political drama. I'm talking about medieval political drama. War. Why can't we be friends? Why can't... No, not right now. You're one of my absolute favorite bands, but calm down. No. Think of say, for example, Marth's game. What is Marth's game really good at? It's showing this really interesting conflict. He's lost everything, right? But he's got friends, he's got enemies, some countries are for him, some are against him, some people within those different countries even. And so he has to find a way to gain allies so he can stop the villain and get his country back. We're talking about these interesting interactions between countries. So no, we're not talking about the crazy political discussions that your family just loves to have at Thanksgiving time when everybody gets together. You know, when your grandpa's like, I don't really like the president that much, and then your uncle's like, what are you talking about? He's the greatest thing since Billy Bob Modine. No, we're not talking about that kind of political drama. So I guess in short, what I'm really trying to say is yes, it's a fantasy storyline, but it's not as hard of a fantasy storyline as other games. It tends to focus less on the magic and the fantasy of things, and more on human conflicts. This is why I bring up that we want it to be more medieval and a little less on the fantasy side. You gotta have your MacGuffins, you gotta have your swords, you gotta have your dragons. Dragons are an important part of Fire Emblem. However, war, focus on that, not so much on the mystical, magical elements of everything. Furthermore, now this next part is largely just my personal thoughts. Feel free to disagree with me, especially on this one in the comments. I also would add, I think Fire Emblem is better when it has a soft magic system. For those of you that don't know, a soft magic system versus a hard magic system largely stems down to how much is the magic explained and how much rules are there. A hard magic system is going to have very clear rules on how magic works, and it's going to be very important to stick to those rules. I think Fire Emblem is better with a soft magic system because how the magic works is not a central focus. When you take so much time to describe and explain how the magic works, that once again takes away from the conflict. So it's okay if we don't know how exactly mages throw fireballs. That's not the point of the storyline. If this was a book, I would maybe think differently, because in a book you have a lot more time to explain things. This is a video game, and we're dealing with players. We don't want to spend too much time on explaining a magic system when we really want their focus to be here, on the war. So that is what I personally think what type of magic system should be in Fire Emblem. But feel free to disagree with me and let me know what you think on that point. What do I mean by dark? Well, zombies are fun. Dark worlds are fun. Creepy, yeah, that's fun. But I'm talking about some of the most dark themes ever. The dark side of humanity. Monsters are really scary, right? Well, the thing is, they're also just unrealistic. I get much more of a chill down my spine talking about some of the crazy things that happened in World War II. We understand humans, so when humans do dark things, it is extra dark. And that's what Fire Emblem does so well. And as I mentioned in my last video, what Nintendo needs. We need dark themes, we need dark storylines. All of the best Fire Emblem storylines include very dark themes. Take a look at Genealogy of the Holy War. We're talking about fighting an enemy that sacrifices babies and children to a dark god. Wow. That happened in the medieval days. I would probably go on a crusade against those people too. But here's the thing, it also cannot be forced. I was really trying to think of a word to describe what I'm getting at here, and the word that came to mind was bite. Fire Emblem storylines need some bite. Edginess is not bite. Edginess is forced bite. Fates is that example. Fates is not dark. It's just edgy, and it doesn't work very well at all. I also don't want engage, which I think is too zany. There are quite a few people who have voiced that they're tired of Fire Emblem turning into a modern-day anime, and I largely agree with that statement. That is not the route that Fire Emblem should go. Many RPGs have grandiose cosmic threats and these grandiose battles, or they're just fun, magical adventures like I've talked about, and that's fine. But gritty Fire Emblem storylines with bite leave a real impact. The storylines that I love from Fire Emblem have left a big impression on me, because they don't shy away from the truly dark force that can be humanity. And it makes a lot of sense because it's a war story. War is serious. Do you want me to get a copyright strike? No. Yeah, that's what I thought. I'll call you later. Love you. If you want a war story to have impact, you gotta give it some bite. Give me the tragedy of Dusker. Give me the psychologically messed up villains in Sacred Stones. Or give me the entirety of the plot in Genealogy and the Holy War. Which I really hope, if they make a remake of it, they do not change much at all. Because these themes, what do? They really cause you to think. The moral of the story means so much more. Another way to look at it would be this. I want the Fire Emblem storyline to make me ask the classic villain question. Should humanity be allowed to exist with the awful things it is capable of? Now, ultimately, the answer is yes. Of course they should be allowed to exist. They are mostly good. But I need that grittiness. I really hope I'm making sense here. I don't want a neutered storyline where we walk on eggshells and are afraid to have anything be truly deplorable. Fire Emblem needs to be willing to tackle those topics. And when it does, man, you can bet that those storylines will leave an impact on you. I've overcome the challenges of many a game, and it's fun to overcome those challenges. But the best Fire Emblem storylines, they leave me with an impression of overcoming more than just challenges, but overcoming tragedy. Some of you might think that maybe I'm being too serious about this, and that's fair. To clarify, no, I'm not saying I want no zaniness. Of course I want a little bit of fun and goofy characters. But what I am saying is, when you start taking away the things I'm talking about, that's when you get these wishy-washy storylines that just don't fit in a war setting. Like many of you probably watching this video, I grew up in a place surrounded by people telling me that video games are a waste of time. But you know what? It was the gritty Fire Emblem storylines that taught me that video games can absolutely have meaning. The lords in the Fire Emblem games are the light in a dark world, and fill you with a drive to become a better person. You might laugh at me for saying that, but I don't care. These storylines have meant a lot to me, and they've meant a lot to me because they were not afraid to go to the dark places that many are afraid to go. This is something I do think that Three Houses ended up doing very well. And I hope we get more of Three Houses and a little bit less of, say, Engage's storyline. Character development is different in every game. For example, in Mega Man X, especially X1 and X2, Zero's character development has no direct effect on the gameplay. Yeah, it might affect your motivation, but the combat itself is not affected by Zero's character development. You can skip everything and still get the same experience. Fire Emblem's not quite the same way, because one of the things about Fire Emblem, remember, epic warfare simulator, you're supposed to care about these characters. It's supposed to be difficult when you send them out to battle because you care about them. Well, if the character development is bad, then you don't care. Once again, we're talking about Fates. Wow, are you surprised? Frickin' Perry. I don't care if Perry dies. Death to her. In fact, there's a lot of characters like that. See, here's the thing about Fates. That's its biggest problem. People talk about the storyline, and yes, the storylines are bad, but the real issue is the characters. They're just one note, many of them are insufferable.
Oh, brother, this guy stinks!
Now there's some good ones. I think Ryoma's pretty good. But at the same time though, there's just so many forgettable and bad characters, you really don't care if they die. The character development in Fire Emblem directly affects the gameplay. If you are the kind of person who doesn't care about characters, and you just play through Fire Emblem skipping everything, you're going to have a different experience than somebody who plays the game, reads the supports, and pays attention to all of the character development points. Earlier in the video, I showed a picture of Blazing Sword. Blazing Sword's storyline is so bad, and if you don't believe me, go watch Mecha's video on it. He outlines it very well. It's riddled with plot holes. But here's the thing, a lot of people don't care. Why? Because the characters are overall good. I really came to love Ellawood, I came to love Hector, I came to love Wrath, oh, and Kent too. Sorry, I have to mention my boy Kent, Florina and her sisters. There's just some good characters here that you care about. Now, granted, some are not super great. Frickin' Nino, I don't know who wrote her. But then even you might still like her anyway. There's something to hold on to. You care about them, and again, it affects the combat. It affects how you tactically move and use your units. So here's the thing. I would rather have a bad storyline in Fire Emblem with good characters than the other way around. You have to make sure the characters are good. Can one-note characters be fun, particularly if they're funny? You know, Alcrest and Bernadetta, I can't help but like them, but I would never argue they're well-written characters. They're pretty one-note. Fine, as long as the majority of the characters are good, then I think it's okay, but preferably, please don't repeat Fates, and Engage came close to repeating Fates. I think it did better, but man, characters, please. If you give me good characters that I care about, then it's going to make a big difference, and I can forgive bad storyline beats if you give me good characters behind those beats. Okay, this is probably where I get a little bit controversial. The point, I should say, that people will disagree with me the most. I think avatars need to go, especially self-inserts. Here's the thing. Fire Emblem is a game, like I said, that's focused on war, the combat, the history, the drama of that war, right? So when you add a self-insert, it just drags and drags more and more attention away from that. I mean, Corrin is a prime example of this. The whole time the game is telling you, oh, Corrin, he's so charismatic. Look at how charismatic Corrin is. Bro, what are you talking about? I wouldn't follow Corrin anywhere. But the game tells you over and over again, and everything just revolves around Corrin. Everything. It's just so unrealistic. Here's the thing, and this gets to the next point with that of being able to marry anybody. I'm gonna tell you a sad truth of reality. Not everybody likes you. Get over it? What can I say? There is no human being on the planet that is so utterly amazing that everybody wants them. You're not compatible with everybody. And so what ends up happening is you get this main lord that you've either designed or picked the gender, right? And then all of a sudden, all the other characters start bending their personalities so that they can marry you. It ruins characters and it takes away from the storyline. I will be blunt. Fire Emblem is a tactical RPG. It's not a dating sim. If you want to play a dating sim, there's other games for you. I'm happy to have you, but don't expect Fire Emblem to be a dating sim. And of course, I'm particularly referring to one main character that you design being able to marry anybody. Now, the whole matchmaking game that is support conversations is fine. That's different. Everyone has their own characters they like and get along with. Some of them get married, some cannot. That whole thing I think is fine. To me, that's not really a dating sim. That's an interesting mechanic that's quite unique to Fire Emblem, being able to play matchmaker. It fits with the combat, it fits with the storyline, it fits with the theme. I mean, hey, people fall in love. There's plenty of love stories in medieval history too. It works great. Keep the matchmaking from support conversations. If you want to ignore it, great. But I think it adds a lot to the game. I wanted to clarify that. However, there are people out there who get this weird idea that, oh, like having a designable character just works in every game. It should be in every game. You should be able to make your own character and choose your own path. No, it doesn't work in every game. There is no mechanic that works in every single game. Every game's different. I don't think it works in Fire Emblem. It just takes too much attention away from the storyline and creates this unrealistic character. I don't hate anybody who likes the avatar setup. However, I do think a lot of them don't understand that what they're asking for is hurting Fire Emblem storylines. And again, I'm gonna keep saying it over and over again. Fire Emblem is a game that's meant to be serious and it's meant to be about war. When you have this unrealistic character that everyone's obsessed with, it just hurts that. What's kind of interesting too is I think my point shows, because when you look at the games with avatars, generally speaking, they don't have very good storylines. Fates, Engage, even Awakening storyline isn't really that great. Are there exceptions? Well, you got Mystery of the Emblem, but you're kind of just there. You're just really an observer. Chris isn't even really part of the storyline. And I often found myself saying, Chris, I really don't care about you. Can we get back to Marth, please? Now, I know what some of you might say, well, what about Three Houses? Three Houses has an avatar, and it worked fine. Yes, but the real reason why Three Houses works is because of Dimitri, Edelgard, and Claude. It's because of them. They're the ones that really make that storyline work. And a lot of people online, in particular, argue that Byleth is the weakest part of the storyline. And in many ways, I believe that's true. They try to make Byleth work by having them be this blank slate, and it works better, so the storyline is able to function better, and I think overall, Three Houses has a great storyline. I'd prefer Byleth over Alir or Corrin, but even when Byleth joins Edelgard, it just doesn't make sense that all of a sudden Byleth, who hated what happened to his father, all of a sudden says praise the Empire, when Edelgard is partially responsible for the death of his father. I mean, whether or not she admits to it, she is. Now, of course, games like Animal Crossing, Stardew Valley, farming sims, and like slice of life games. Of course, avatars work there. Or like open world adventures. Those work great. You're going off on your own adventure. That's a great place to have a self-insert and an avatar, and you. It's a great place to express yourself, but with Fire Emblem, that's not the kind of story it's trying to tell. Is there a way that you could make it work? Well, maybe. Here's something that I don't think enough people talk about. The problem with the Fire Emblem avatars, it's not that you need more impactful decisions or a rewrite of the character's personality. It has to do with a fundamental writing flaw, and that is this. You have a character that's supposed to represent you, supposed to be you, your MC, and yet they're also heavily connected to the world at which the story takes place. You cannot have both. This is why so many of these lords feel so strange. Byleth doesn't feel like a representation of me because he's so heavily connected to Sothis, to Rhea, and he's also a famous mercenary. But at the same time, he feels strange in this world because he's such a blank slate. These avatars don't fit in anywhere. So, how could we make this work? Well, what do other games do to fix this problem? Look at Elden Ring, look at Animal Crossing, look at Harvest Moon. You are a foreigner. You're from a completely different place, coming into a brand new world ready to explore. Now, the player can make whatever MC they want and make up whatever story they want behind that MC. You can't do that with the Fire Emblem Lords because they're too entrenched in the conflict. If they want to continue doing avatars, to me the only way to do it is to make the main character a foreigner from a different continent. Perhaps they could be a mercenary looking for better luck, and then they somehow get involved in this conflict. You make that character designable, of course, and you can choose the gender. but there's only a specific certain amount of characters that they can do supports with and end up marrying. And then on top of that, you could potentially have a Captain Shepard from Mass Effect vibe going. So as you make decisions, the character molds themselves based upon that. So if you want to be more of a jerk, you can respond as a jerk. If you want to be a gallant hero, you can respond like that. And then as you do that, maybe even the supports that are available to you change. So if you want to be a jerk, then, that Pegasus girl doesn't like you anymore, and, too bad, you changed it.
Another idol has replaced me.
Another idol? What idol?
Golden one. Changed. You are another man.
I was...
I think that could work, having an interesting way to have a self-insert, but they still have a character. But even then, I just feel like it still takes too much away from the main storyline, because we're just wrapped up in you. You, everything's about your avatar. And I don't think it works when we're trying to tell an epic narrative with multiple perspectives. When it feels like something out of a Shonen Jump, it just doesn't work that great. Because those stories are molded to fit and revolve around one character and their journey. Fire Emblem is partially about a hero's journey, but it's about conflict. It's not quite the same. It's not a grand adventure. It's about a character becoming a good leader, but again, a leader of an army in a war. But I totally get why people like avatars, because gameplay-wise, they're a lot of fun. And here's something important about myself, actually. I'm more of a gameplay guy than a storyline guy. So games like Engage, I still thoroughly enjoyed. Even though the storyline I didn't care for and some of the characters were just way too zany, there were still a handful of good characters who felt like classic Fire Emblem characters. And the gameplay, honestly, some of my favorite in any Fire Emblem game. And I also thoroughly enjoyed how they paid good homage to the Fire Emblem series. Granted, except for one particular thing, which makes me really pissed off, and I'm definitely making a video about it. But then, Mink Daddy, why are you even making this video if you don't care about storylines? I do care about storylines, of course I do. Even if I put gameplay above it, a storyline can be so bad that it will affect whether or not I replay a game. Fates. I don't have any interest in playing that game again. Why? Because the characters are just so terrible. I don't care about them at all. And unless they make like an HD remake for Fates for the Switch 2, I don't plan on replaying it anytime soon. With all that being said, I don't think the juice is worth the squeeze with the avatars. In other words, I don't think the amount of fun gameplay you get out of the avatars makes up for the amount of story damage caused. Now, if the future of Fire Emblem is avatars, I will probably still stick around, especially if they maintain the high quality gameplay that Fire Emblem has always had, and as long as they don't go too crazy with the storyline. But I do have every right to express my distaste for it and seek out like-minded people. So remember, I'm not talking about gameplay implementation of avatars. I'm specifically talking about how avatars negatively affect storylines in Fire Emblem. However, I think it's only fair that I take this time to talk about a bias that I might have. I just get tired of this incessant need that people have about relatability, and the misunderstanding that relatability means they're exactly like me. Well, that's not completely true. You can relate to anybody. I mean, just look at the lords in other games. You can still learn interesting things from them. For example, this whole idea that they have it easy when they really don't. As a lord, princess, or prince, you've got to take over when your time comes. You've got to lead that country, you got to manage that estate, and if you don't, you could cause a civil war, which would be absolutely selfish. They don't really have freedom. Fire Emblem lords kind of help show me that. I was like, oh, wow, that's actually very interesting. And it's a big part, too, of, say, like, Ephraim's storyline. See, Ephraim wants to be a mercenary. He wants to be a man that lives a life of combat. But part of his journey in Sacred Stones is coming to the realization that he has to respect and accept the responsibility to lead his country as their king. And it becomes his worthwhile goal. It's a lesson about accepting and embracing responsibility, if you will. So I guess my challenge here then is think of somebody you are either very different from or somebody that you heavily disagree with. It could be a fake character, it could be a real person, it could be a celebrity. Go look at them and try to find something you agree with them on or can relate to, and I guarantee you'll find something, and you can learn something from them. That's the cool thing about the human race. That's the cool thing about life. And that's why I think it's not completely necessary to have an avatar. You don't need it. You'll be fine. Especially because this is Fire Emblem. You get so many characters, and you can find representation and relatability in other characters who aren't the main lord.
The color of your skin don't matter to me. Live in harmony.
Hey, what did I tell you? Not right now. Amen, though. Amen, love you. But later. Not right now. Wrong war. You don't need to insert this one-size-fit-all lord that ends up becoming an unrealistic alien. Just to make sure this is clear, this matters because you're dealing with a battle system that's trying to be a little more realistic and a little bit of a simulator and setting a tone with a little bit of realism in it. These avatars cause a jarring whiplash effect when they are this unrealistic. In an epic war story where the focus and perspectives are spread throughout a massive amount of characters. Is there a future where we could have good avatars in Fire Emblem? Maybe. I could potentially be swayed on this point. But I just don't like this idea that we're going to adopt a foreign mechanic because it's popular and say we'll just make it work. I've also heard some people insinuate that these avatars in Fire Emblem are helping it sell better. This is why I say, give us Genealogy of the Holy War with no avatar and let's see how it does. I don't think an avatar is necessary for Fire Emblem to sell well. Look at Echoes. It did fine. And honestly, I think the real reason why it didn't do as well as Awakening more has to do with the fact that it was late in the life cycle of the 3DS. I personally don't think there's enough data to suggest that Fire Emblem needs to have an avatar to be successful. I could be wrong on that point, but that's how I see it right now. In summary, Fire Emblem is at its best when it tells an epic medieval story with gripping characters highlighting the dark side of humanity, conflicts, all while supporting an epic battle system, and not a lovely magical adventure that revolves around you. Thank you so much for watching and listening to a crazy man and his ramblings. Or, hey, maybe you agree with me. Whatever you think, please let me know in the comments below. And I did a little bit different with this video, a little bit of a different vibe, I mean. I wanted to see if I just do better trying to be a little more funny and a little more outspoken than my last video, which was a little more serious. So let me know in the comments below too what you prefer. I'm honestly curious, what am I better at, or am I just terrible all around? Anyway, what do you think makes a good Fire Emblem storyline? Even if at the end of the day you disagree with me, I hope you at least come out of this video with the understanding that you can't just have a good storyline. The storyline needs to fit with the combat and the legacy of the series. If it doesn't fit very well, then it's not gonna feel quite like a Fire Emblem game. As always, too, please be respectful in your comments. Attack the argument that people make, don't attack the person. That's just a good life lesson. If you're gonna run around life calling everyone who disagrees with you an idiot, you're not gonna convince anybody, or very few. Thank you for sticking around, and don't forget to subscribe.
This is some kind of twisted joke. This is some kind of twisted joke. This is some twisted joke.